By the time this video airs, the 2026 World Championships will be just 24 hours away, and upon its conclusion, we will finally have an answer to the all-important question, can I make Dragapult cool? With Worlds being the most important tournament of the year, obviously I want to win it, which means I should probably play the best deck. And following G-Block's rotation out of Standard, it has unquestionably been Dragapult, absolutely dominating every single tournament since. But there's one issue. Personally, for me, this deck is just not fun. And I'd rather come dead last than win Worlds with a deck I simply do not enjoy. So there are two potential approaches to this dilemma. I could either lower my odds of winning by playing literally any deck that can't Phantom Dive, or I could take on the monumental, potentially impossible challenge of cooking up a cool Dragapult list. Currently, Dragapult is seeing success with a number of varied partners, such as Blaziken's supplementary energy acceleration and crucial fire typing, Dusknoir's explosive damage potential, Dunsparce's excellent additional draw, and the ever-annoying disruption provided by Crushing Hammer. There is a bit of crossover between some of these variants, like Crushing Hammer Dusknoir builds that completely forego Rare Candy, and honestly, while any of these variants could potentially win the World Championships, it also clearly demonstrates just how much free real estate there is to play with once you've locked down those core Dragapult pieces. But before I show you some absolutely disgusting lists, I think it's important that we take a step back and look at some of the history of Dragapult. Studying previous iterations can genuinely be one of the best ways to inspire new ideas. So picture this, it's May of 2024, Twilight Masquerade has dropped, and despite being a fresh new archetype, Dragapult really isn't that same meta menace that it is today. Obviously, everyone recognized Drakloak's Recon Directive was an absurdly broken ability, providing an incredibly efficient draw engine and some really interesting deck manipulation. 320 HP without weakness should probably be illegal, and Phantom Dive is just objectively an insane attack, if you can get it off, and that was actually one of the biggest issues the deck first faced. Initially, people were trying all sorts of methods for powering up Pult, pairing it with cards like Clairvoyant Sense Xatu, Lost Box's Mirage Gate, Infernal Rain Charizard, or just using Pidgeot's Quick Search to find Neo Upper Energy. While it did see some immediate success, notably winning NAIC in the Seniors Division, it really wasn't all that popular, with the true stars of Twilight Masquerade being Munkidori, Blood Moon Ursaluna, and Teal Mask Ogerpon. And with the release of Kyurem in the following set, completely pushing Regidrago V-Star over the edge, Dragapult was no longer even the best way to use Phantom Dive. There was simply no reason to include this card in your deck as anything other than fuel for Apex Dragon. And Regidrago V-Star's discard would continue to be the most frequent home for Dragapult for the next 6 months. However, it is worth noting that Stellar Crown's additional Terra support, primarily the new A-Spec Sparkling Crystal, did breathe a bit of life into actual Dragapult decks, leading to a brief resurgence where it even managed to take down Dortmund Regionals partnered with Dusknoir. During this same period of Regidrago's dominance, we also got to witness one of Dragapult's most based variants, when it teamed up with everyone's favorite future fella, Iron Thorns. Despite initially seeming like an insane concept, the deck actually really took off and saw legitimate success top-cutting multiple regionals. Having a way to slow down the game was really helpful for enabling and sustaining Dragapult's primary game plan. If only there was a better way to do this, then maybe, just maybe, Dragapult could become the best deck in format. Obligatory Itchy Pollen merch plug. Go to TimDanklin.com. The introduction of Badoo's Itchy Pollen solved almost all of Dragapult's problems, and it instantly skyrocketed to become the most played deck in the room. Primarily pairing with Dusknoir, but some builds did see success without the Ghost, opting to use the space for Munkidori and other defensive tools. Pult definitely enjoyed its time on top of the tier list, but with rotation rapidly approaching, it seemed like that was all about to come to a screeching halt, because as Pokemon often does, when a single deck becomes too strong, they print a direct counter card. And Journey Together was no different, bringing Lily's Clefairy as a way to finally put an end to the Dragon type's lack of weakness. However, in reality, this wasn't the case at all. Sure, Gardevoir became a bit more difficult to deal with, but it wasn't anywhere near enough to stop the deck from continuing to see immense success both with and without Dusknoir. At this time, there were also a few flashes of Dragapult Charizard, as well as Dragapult Frostlass and Dragapult Zoroark. Yeah, not gonna lie, those were actually pretty sick. And following the rotation of key consistency cards such as Pokestop and Radiant Greninja, Gholdengo seriously began using Dracloak as its secondary draw engine, frequently going as far as to throw in an actual Dragapult for good measure and counterplay to Cornerstone Ogerpon. Speaking of Gholdengo, at last year's Worlds, as soon as it got its golden hands on Genesect EX, it legitimately took the meta hostage. In order to remain at all relevant, Dragapult was pretty much forced to partner with either Dusknoir or occasionally Charizard in order to have some answer to the coin bonus demon. And sure, Dragapult did still see a ton of success during this period, but it is definitely when the list began to start feeling the most homogenous, and this pretty much persisted all the way up until Gholdengo's forced exit from the meta as part of the most recent rotation. With the complete absence of Gholdengo and Gardevoir, as well as Megabox now being reduced to just a shell of its former self, Dragapult was left alone at the top, finally becoming the meta menace that it is today and truly reaching its highest levels of dominance. Initially, players experimented with some interesting Noctowl variants, but those quickly fell off, leaving the big three Pult flavors as Dragapult Dusknoir, Dragapult Blaziken, and Dragapult Dudunsparce. That is, until Andrew Hedrick slammed in 4 crushing hammers, 1 LA Regionals, and changed everything. Despite initially seeming like a complete meme, it does make sense. If Dragapult is by far the best deck in format and Crushing Hammer is the best form of counterplay, then I guess we're flipping coins. To this day, it has continued to be the strongest and most successful way to play the archetype, perfectly demonstrating how Dragapult really does just have a bunch of free slots to throw in anything you want. That doesn't mean innovation is dead though, far from it. In fact, at the most recent major international, Gardevoir enthusiast turned Dragapult enjoyer Henry Chow slapped in a 1-1-1 Alakazam line and ran it all the way to top 16 alongside Urbana Med. This is the kind of fresh technology that I love seeing, and I'm really hoping a few similar cooks pop up at the World Championships this year. So what's next? How can I possibly spice up Dragapult to make it cool? Well, Ethan's Typhlosion and Mega Greninja are already established off-meta decks that both benefit from Dracloak's incredible draw engine, often choosing to include a copy of Dragapult for a potential alternative attacker, which is very reminiscent of how Gholdengo briefly adopted the draw engine, although these decks aren't really focused on Phantom Diving. So why don't we take a bit of inspiration from the previous Dragapult Iron Thorns variants? Capable of completely walling out certain decks and seriously slowing down others. At NAIC, Clefairy Box went on an absolute tear, with the winning list taking down 10 separate Dragapult players. And their only loss? Crustle. So if we just include this crab in Dragapult, what could possibly go wrong? This is definitely one of the ideas of all time. Although we don't necessarily need to add an extra Pokemon line into Dragapult in order to make it cool. One of the sickest cards released this year has gotta be Transformation Tome. It's already proven its worth in Zoroark, and Dracloak similarly provides a solid draw engine to support it. You can make some really neat plays by popping Dusknoir and immediately spawning it back in. I did run this concept at locals a few times and wasn't able to pull off anything like this more than once or twice. Although I gotta say, it was insanely fun when I did actually get to piece together one of these massive plays. There is another card that I personally find extremely fun to play. And right now, one of Dragapult's biggest hurdles is a 340 HP Mega Mole that seriously struggles with single prize Pokemon. If I were to Phantom Dive and spread 60 onto Mega Excadrill, then Mad Bite would deal exactly enough damage to finish it off. Anyway, fellas, that's the video. Hopefully I win Worlds this weekend. Go subscribe.